On our anniversary, my husband danced with his mistress in front of all our guests. What he didn't know was that by dawn, I would leave him without a home and without my $5 million inheritance. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if, for a second, you feel this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Hope Anderson. I am 63 years old, and I have just woken up from a nightmare that lasted 4 decades. For 41 years, I lived beside Julian Price, the man who promised to love me until the end of our days. What I didn't imagine is that those days would end precisely when he decided to celebrate our anniversary with another woman. It was a Friday evening in the Hudson Valley, and the air smelled of jasmine and promise. I had put on my navy blue dress, the one Julian always said made me look poised and respectable. I'd spent the whole morning at the local hair salon, the same one I'd been going to for 20 years. Carmen, the owner, had told me while setting my hair, "Oh, Hope, you're so lucky. 41 years of marriage and your husband still throws you parties." If only she knew. The estate Julian rented was one of those old properties with stone courtyards and fountains that whisper secrets to the wind. He had hired musicians, waiters in impeccable uniforms, and Napa Valley wine that cost more than the monthly allowance he gave me. I thought, naively, that he was finally seeing me again, that after years of coldness, of hurtful comments disguised as jokes, he had remembered why he married me. How stupid I was. When I walked into the main hall, something felt off from the very first moment. The guests greeted me. Yes, but there was something in their eyes. A pity I couldn't decipher then. Forced smiles, hugs that lasted a second too long, as if they were offering condolences for something I didn't yet know had died. The music was soft, violins playing unforgettable, as couples moved slowly on the makeshift dance floor in the central patio. The string lights cast golden shadows on the stone walls, and the scent of roses from the garden mixed with the expensive perfume of the female guests. It was, objectively, a perfect night, until I saw him. Julian was in the center of the dance floor, but not with me. His arms were wrapped around the waist of Stella Morris, that 33-year-old who worked at his law firm as a specialized assistant. The same one I had served coffee and shortbread cookies to in my own kitchen just 3 weeks earlier, when she came to the house supposedly for Julian to sign some urgent documents. I remember thinking she seemed very polite. She had called me Mrs. Anderson, with respect, had complimented my home's decor, and had even asked for my apple pie recipe. And I, like the fool I was, had felt flattered by the attention of such a young, successful woman. Now I was watching her smile against my husband's neck as he led her in a waltz he had never danced with me. My legs trembled. The glass of red wine in my hand began to vibrate, creating small red ripples that spread like blood in water. I approached slowly, dodging other couples who moved aside as if they could sense the impending catastrophe. "Julian," I whispered when I was close enough. He turned without letting her go, wearing that condescending smile I knew so well. The one he used when my friends came over and I offered an opinion on politics. The one that appeared when I tried to suggest which movie we should watch on Sundays. "Hope, don't make a scene," he said in a slow, almost bored voice. "It's just a dance. Don't be ridiculous." And then, looking me up and down with those gray eyes I once believed loved me, he added, "Do you really think anyone wants to dance with you with that tired look on your face?" The silence that followed was deafening. The violins continued to play, but all nearby conversations stopped. The guests pretended to look away while their ears strained not to miss a single word of the spectacle I was apparently creating. Stella looked at me with a mixture of pity and triumph that cut through me like a knife. "Mrs. Anderson," she murmured softly, "perhaps you should sit down. You look a little pale." And nobody said a thing, not a soul. Charles Miller, our neighbor for decades, kept talking about football as if he hadn't heard. Mary Jo Reynolds, my supposed friend from the book club, suddenly found her champagne flute fascinating. Even Father Gonzalez, who had officiated our wedding, discreetly moved away toward the charcuterie board. They all heard it. And they all chose a complicit silence. That night, we drove back to the city in the Mercedes-Benz that I had paid for with my inheritance. He drove with his usual calm, humming the melody he had danced to with her, while I bled out internally in the passenger seat. The lights of Manhattan streamed past the window like golden tears, and I counted every stoplight, every turn, every second until I could lock myself in my bathroom and vomit all the poison I had swallowed that night. When he parked in the garage of our Upper East Side townhouse, the house my parents had left me, which he considered his, Julian turned to me with the same expression he'd used to scold a dog that had soiled the rug. "I don't want another scene, do you understand?" he said, fastening the button on his gray blazer. "I will not have my reputation ruined by the delusions of a jealous menopausal woman." I climbed the stairs holding onto the banister like an old woman, though inside I felt like a lost child. I locked myself in the master bathroom, and just as I'd known I would, I threw up. But not because of what I had seen. I threw up for what I had endured for years, for all the times I had swallowed his humiliations, for every "it's just a joke" hope after he'd torn me down in front of others, for every "you don't understand these things" when I tried to have a say in the finances of my own inheritance. Because yes, everything we had came from me. The house, the bank accounts, the investments, the $5 million my mother had left me with a single condition written in her will, "so that you may live with the dignity he will never give you, my daughter." But I had chosen to trust. I had signed papers. I had put his name next to mine on all the properties, so he would feel like part of the family. I had turned my inheritance into our fortune because I believed love was built on generosity and trust. I had never felt so stupid. That dawn, sitting on the edge of my marital bed that no longer felt like mine, I remembered my mother's words the day before she died. "Hope, my girl, promise me you will never let anyone make you feel less than you are. Dignity is not negotiable, not even for love." And for the first time in 41 years, I decided she was right. The days following that public humiliation were like walking on shattered glass. Every step hurt, but I kept going because it was what I had learned to do for 41 years. Endure, smile, and pretend everything was fine. Julian acted as if nothing had happened. He would get up every morning at 7 sharp, shower with the hot water I paid for, shave with the electric razor I gave him for his birthday, and get dressed in the tailor-made suits we had bought at Saks Fifth Avenue with money from my inheritance. Then he would come down for breakfast like the king of a castle he had never built. "Good morning, darling," he would say, as I served him coffee in the porcelain cup that had belonged to my grandmother. "Is my blue shirt ready for tomorrow? I have an important meeting with some clients from Chicago." And I, like the fool I was, would reply, "Of course, Julian. I ironed it yesterday." But inside, a small voice began to whisper questions I had silenced for years. When was the last time he asked me how I slept? When had he ever served me breakfast? When had I ever been the priority in my own home? That afternoon, while he was at his office working, though I now suspected his late hours had more to do with Stella than with case files, I sat in my wicker rocking chair in the backyard and began to remember. I didn't want to, but the memories came like an avalanche that had been waiting 40 years to bury me. I remembered when my father died, 15 years ago. I had cried for days, and Julian hadn't canceled a single work appointment to be with me at the wake. "Your father isn't suffering anymore, Hope," he had said, while nodding the Hermes tie I had bought him. "Besides, these clients from Atlanta aren't going to wait for me. The dead can wait. The living can't." I remembered when my mother got sick with cancer, and I needed to care for her during her last 2 years. Julian constantly complained that this house feels like a hospital, and that I can't concentrate with all this drama. He never visited her in the hospital. Not once. When she died and left me the inheritance, he was more excited about the money than about comforting me in my grief. "Now we can finally live like decent people," he had said while reviewing the papers from the estate attorney. "It's about time your family did something useful." And I had interpreted that cruelty as financial relief, as if my parents had died to solve our money problems. I remembered when our first granddaughter, Elena, was born 8 years ago. Julian arrived at the hospital 3 hours late because he had a meeting that ran long. While I cried with emotion holding that tiny baby who smelled of hope and the future, he was checking his text messages. "Can we go now?" he asked after 10 minutes. "I have to be up early tomorrow." But what hurt the most to remember was the money. Always the damned money. For all these years, Julian had managed our finances with the excuse that he understood numbers, and I was too sentimental to make important decisions. Every month he gave me $250 for your personal expenses, honey, as if it were charity. $250 for my clothes, my hairdresser, my medications, my small pleasures, my life. Meanwhile, he bought himself Swiss watches for $3,500, traveled to Miami with colleagues from the firm, and ate at restaurants where a bottle of wine cost what I had for the entire month. His closet was full of Italian suits, English shoes, and French colognes. Mine had 3 good dresses that I wore for years until they were so worn out it was embarrassing. "You don't need more clothes, Hope," he would say when I timidly hinted that I'd like to update my wardrobe. "At your age, what's important is sobriety, not vanity. At my age." As if at 63 I no longer had the right to feel beautiful, to desire nice things, to exist beyond serving his breakfast and ironing his shirts. One afternoon in October, when the leaves on the trees along Park Avenue began to turn golden, I decided to do something I hadn't dared to do in years. I went to the bank to ask about our accounts. I wanted to know exactly how much money there was, where it came from, where it was going. The teller, a young woman with a slight Southern accent, looked at me strangely when I asked to speak with the manager about my account. "Your account, ma'am. The only name listed as the primary holder is Mr. I. Price. You're registered as spouse, but without access to financial information. Without access to financial information. To my own money. To the inheritance my parents had left me with so much love. There must be a mistake," I murmured, feeling the world tilt beneath my feet. That money was mine. I signed papers so he could manage it, but it's still my inheritance. The young woman checked her computer, growing increasingly uncomfortable. "According to what I see here, Mrs. Anderson, a full transfer of ownership was made 15 years ago. Your husband is the sole signatory authorized for all transactions, inquiries, and investment decisions." I left the bank feeling nauseous. Outside on the street, New York City carried on at its normal pace. Cars whizzed down Fifth Avenue. Mothers pushed strollers with laughing children. Young couples walked hand in hand planning futures they believed they owned. And I just stood there, discovering that for 15 years, I had been an intruder in my own financial life. That night, I tried to talk to my daughters. I called Lauren first, my eldest, who lived in Chicago with her architect husband. "Mom, not with your drama again," she said before I could even explain what I'd discovered. "Dad has always handled the money because you don't understand that stuff. Don't you think it's a little late to be playing the independent woman?" Then I called Jenna, my baby, who was now 35 and had just opened a restaurant in the West Village. "Oh, Mom, don't start with your stories. Dad has taken care of you your whole life. Do you know how hard it is to find a man who handles everything? You should be grateful instead of inventing problems." Grateful. That word echoed in my head for hours. Grateful that a man had taken total control of the inheritance my parents left me. Grateful that he gave me an allowance as if I were a child. Grateful that he had publicly humiliated me on our anniversary. That night, when Julian came home smelling of a woman's perfume, a floral, youthful scent that was definitely not mine, I pretended to be asleep. I heard him shower, brush his teeth, and get into his side of the marital bed, which felt bigger and colder each night. "Good night, darling," he murmured into the darkness, in the same tone he would use to dismiss a dog. And I, lying less than 3 feet away, realized something terrible. I couldn't remember the last time he had told me he loved me. Not a habitual "love you" at the end of a call. Not a meaningless "honey" used as a placeholder. Loved me. Those words that had once been the center of my universe. I couldn't remember. And the worst part was, I couldn't remember the last time I had said it to him. And truly meant it. At some point in these 41 years, our marriage had become a stage play where we were both performing roles we no longer wanted, but didn't know how to quit. The difference was that he had found a new actress for his next production, and I was still there, repeating the same lines, on the same stage, waiting for an applause that would never come. But that night, something shifted. Maybe it was hearing my own daughters defend the man who was betraying me. Maybe it was discovering I had been locked out of my own resources. Or maybe it was simply that after decades of swallowing humiliations, my stomach had no more room. For the first time in 41 years, I asked myself, what if I say no? The question I asked myself that night, what if I say no, lingered in my mind like a melody you can't stop humming. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice things my brain had previously chosen to ignore to protect my sanity, like the way Julian talked about me in front of others. It was never overtly cruel, he never yelled or insulted me directly. It was much more subtle, more poisonous. During a dinner with the Millers, our lifelong neighbors, he casually remarked, "Hope has always been a bit clueless with numbers. Luckily, I'm here to make sure we don't end up on the street." Everyone laughed. I smiled. But inside, something cracked a little more. On another occasion, when my cousin Rose came to visit from Florida, Julian told her, "I don't know what we'd do without Hope. She makes sure the house is perfect, that I never lack a clean shirt. It's a blessing to have such a domestic wife." The word sounded like an insult disguised as a compliment. Domestic. As if I were a useful appliance. But what hurt the most were the special occasions he had started to forget. My 60th birthday had passed completely unnoticed. He came home that night with a bottle of red wine from the grocery store and said, "Sorry, honey, it completely slipped my mind. But look, I brought this to celebrate." The wine cost $4.99. Less than what he spent on his morning coffee at the cafe across from his office. When I turned 62, he didn't even bring wine. And his birthdays? Oh, his birthdays were national events. I planned dinners, invited his friends, bought expensive gifts, decorated the house. Last year, I gave him a Mont Blanc fountain pen that cost $900, saved from my allowance over 4 months. He looked at it for 10 seconds and commented, "It's fine, though I would have preferred the Parker we saw at the store." The Parker cost $1,300, but it was on a gray Wednesday in November that my world completely fell apart. Julian had left early, saying he had a work meeting that would run very late. "Don't wait up for me, Hope. We'll probably be back after midnight." Notice the we, as if it were natural for Stella to be included in his nightly plans. I stayed home as always, watching a series on Netflix while knitting a scarf for my granddaughter Elena. It was one of those quiet nights I used to enjoy, but which now felt like a void slowly swallowing me whole. At 11 o'clock, the landline rang. It was strange because no one ever called that late, except for emergencies. "Hello?" I answered, my heart already racing. "Mrs. Anderson? This is Carmen from the Oak Room. I'm sorry to bother you so late, but your husband left his cell phone on our table, and since we've known the family for years—" "His phone?" Confusion clouded my mind for a moment. "But he told me he had a work meeting." There was an awkward pause on the other end of the line. "Ma'am, your husband had dinner here tonight with a young lady. They seemed very intimate. They reserved our most private table. The Oak Room, the restaurant where we had celebrated our first anniversary, where we had taken the girls when they were little, where Julian had promised we would grow old together. Could you describe the young lady?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Brunette, very beautiful, young. She was wearing a lovely red coat." He asked the pianist to play Unforgettable while they danced. Stella owned a red coat. I had seen her in it when she came to the house. And Unforgettable was the song they had danced to at our anniversary party. I hung up the phone and sat on the living room sofa, staring at the wall as if I could find answers in the peeling paint I had been asking him to fix for years. The house felt huge and silent, filled with the echoes of a life that apparently only I had been living. At 2 a.m, Julian came home. "Sorry for being so late, love," he said, giving me a mechanical kiss on the forehead. The meeting was endless. These clients from Boston are very demanding. "Clients from Boston?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Yes, from a large construction firm. They wanted to review all the contracts tonight." And then I did something I had never done before. I lied to unmask his lie. "Oh, that's nice. By the way, Carmen from the Oak Room called. She said you left your phone there after your work dinner." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched his face shift from surprise to calculation, searching for an explanation that didn't sound like what it was. A confession. Yes. After the meeting, we went for a quick bite. The guys from Boston wanted to experience some traditional New York cuisine. And did you dance to experience the local culture too? This time, he didn't have an immediate answer. He loosened his tie, the silk tie I had given him for Father's Day, and looked at me with the expression he used when someone challenged him professionally. Hope, I think you're reading too much into this. Carmen must be mistaken. Carmen has known you for 15 years, Julian. She saw you dancing with a young woman while you asked the pianist to play our song. Our song? He laughed with a bitterness that cut me like a razor. Hope, please. Don't be so dramatic. It was just background music. Just background music. As if the memories I had cherished for decades were merely ambient noise in the soundtrack of his infidelity. That night we slept in the same bed, but we could have been on different planets. I feigned sleep while he snored beside me, and for the first time in 41 years, I felt something I had never experienced toward my husband: contempt. The following days were a torture of feigned normalcy. He acted as if nothing had happened, as if that conversation had never taken place. He kept asking for breakfast at 7:30, kept leaving his dirty clothes on the bathroom floor, kept coming home late with increasingly elaborate excuses. And I kept smiling, serving, cleaning, pretending. But at night, when he fell asleep after ignoring my attempts at conversation, I would get up and walk through the house like a ghost. I looked at our wedding photos, where I wore a white dress that had cost 3 months of my salary as a secretary. I remembered how I had saved every penny, how I had dreamed of that day as the beginning of a great love story. In one of those photos, Julian was looking at me with what I had then interpreted as adoration. Now, 40 years later, I recognize that expression. It wasn't love, it was calculation. Even then, he had seen in me not a partner, but an opportunity. One night, while going through a box of keepsakes I kept in the guest closet, I found the letters he wrote me when we were dating. I read them one by one, looking for signs I had missed. My dearest Hope, one from 1982 read, I can't wait for us to be a family. Your father told me about the land your family is set to inherit, and I think together we could build something beautiful. The land. Not, with you I could be happy, or, you are the woman of my dreams. The damned land my parents sold years later to leave me the inheritance in cash. In another letter from 1983, I know your mother sometimes doubts my intentions, but you understand that a man needs financial stability to provide for a proper family. How had I been so blind? The signs had been there from the beginning, but I had chosen to see love where there was only ambition. That dawn, sitting on the closet floor with those letters scattered around me like evidence of my own naivety, I made a decision that would change the rest of my life. The next day, while Julian was at his work meeting, which I now knew meant lunch with Stella at some discreet hotel, I took a small key from my jewelry box that I hadn't used in years. It was the key to the safe deposit box my parents had opened in my name when I turned 21. A box that contained documents I had never shown Julian, documents he believed didn't exist. It was time to find out exactly what I had lost, and what I could still get back. The Chase Bank on Fifth Avenue had always seemed imposing to me, with its marble columns and high ceilings that echoed every whisper. But that December morning, as I walked toward the vaults with the trembling key in my hand, the building felt like a cathedral where I was about to make my confession. The employee who escorted me was an older woman, around 50, with her hair in a perfect bun and a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's been a long time since you were here, Mrs. Anderson, she commented as she inserted her master key. Your box has been, let's see, unopened for 8 years? 8 years. Since my mother died and I, shattered by grief, had stored away everything important and decided to deal with it later. A later that had turned into nearly a decade of willful ignorance. When the box opened, I found exactly what I expected, and so much more than I could have imagined. There was my mother's original will, not the copy Julian had seen. In this document, in my mother's own handwriting, were paragraphs I had never shown him. If Hope should ever find herself in a situation of financial abuse or manipulation by her husband, this inheritance shall immediately and completely revert to her sole ownership, with no possibility of transfer to a third party. My mother knew. Somehow she had seen in Julian what it had taken me 40 years to recognize. But what left me breathless was a sealed envelope with my name on it, containing a letter dated just 2 weeks before her death. My dearest Hope, if you are reading this, it is because you have finally opened your eyes. Forgive me for not warning you directly, but I knew you had to figure it out for yourself. Julian never loved you, my child. He saw you as an opportunity from day one. Keep these documents. You will need them when you find the strength to free yourself. Attached to the letter were photographs I had never seen, pictures of Julian with other women during our first years of marriage, private investigations my mother had commissioned without telling me, reports from a detective documenting infidelities dating back to 1985, just 2 years after our wedding. 41 years. For 41 years, I had been living a lie. I returned home, my legs trembling and my heart pounding as if it would explode. Julian was in the living room, watching the news and drinking a scotch from a bottle that cost more than my monthly allowance. "Where were you?" he asked, without looking up from the television. "I was expecting dinner to be ready." "I was at the bank," I replied, keeping my voice steadier than I felt. This time, he did look up. His gray eyes, which had once seemed deep and mysterious, now looked calculating and cold. "At the bank? What for?" "To review some of my mother's papers that I had never read." The silence that followed was thick as fog. I watched him process this information, his lawyer's brain starting to assess the possible implications. "Hope," he finally said, using that condescending tone I knew so well. "We've talked about this. I handle all financial matters. You don't need to worry about complicated papers you won't understand. Like the fact that you've been cheating on me for 40 years? The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. 40 years of submissive silence shattered at once, like a dam finally giving way to the pressure. Julian stood up slowly, placing the scotch glass on the table with deliberate care. "Hope, I don't know what you're talking about. I think you need to see a doctor. Maybe it's your age. You know how it affects women. Don't talk to me like I'm crazy," I yelled, and it was the first time in decades I had raised my voice in that house. "I have pictures, Julian. Investigation reports. Proof that you've been cheating on me since 1985. His face changed completely. The mask of the concerned husband fell away, revealing something much uglier underneath. "And what if it's true?" he said with a coldness that chilled my blood. "Did you really think I was going to spend my life with a woman who has neither interesting conversation nor ambition? I gave you a home, social status, a comfortable life, more than you deserved. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, all the documents spread across the table where we had shared thousands of breakfasts, where we had discussed the girls' problems, where we had pretended to be a happy family for decades. At dawn, I made a decision. I was going to tell Lauren and Jenna everything. I called Lauren first, the more sensible of my daughters, but her reaction shattered me more than any of Julian's infidelities. "Mom, please, don't start with this drama again," she said with an exasperated sigh. "Do you know how stressful my life is right now? Michael is having trouble at the office, the kids need help with school, and now you're coming to me with these fantasies. They're not fantasies, Lauren. I have proof." "Proof? Of what, Mom? That Dad had affairs decades ago? Every man of his generation did. At least he stayed with you, gave you a house, provided for you. Do you know how many women your age would be grateful to have what you have? Grateful. That damned word again. Besides," she continued, not letting me speak, "if Dad misbehaved, it's because you never knew how to be the wife he needed. Always so dramatic, so simple. He needed an intellectual partner." Her words hurt more than a physical blow. My own daughter was blaming me for her father's betrayals. The call with Jenna was even worse. "Mom, I'm embarrassed you're calling me with this stuff," she said bluntly. "Do you know that Dad helped me get the loan for my restaurant? That thanks to his connections I have the best suppliers in the Hudson Valley? And now you want me to turn against him because of, what? Old lady jealousy? It's not jealousy, Jenna. It's dignity." "Dignity? Mom, you're 63 years old. What are you going to do? Get a divorce and end up alone to prove some feminist point? Are you going to throw everything away over a tantrum?" I hung up the phone feeling as if my own daughters had stabbed me in the back. I had raised them, cared for them when they were sick, worked extra hours to pay for their private schools, comforted them through breakups and professional failures. And now, when I needed their support, they treated me like a hysterical old woman who had lost her mind. That afternoon, as I mechanically prepared the dinner Julian would expect at 8:30 sharp, just like every day for 4 decades, the doorbell rang. It was my 8-year-old granddaughter, Elena, Lauren's daughter. Her eyes were swollen from crying and she was carrying a small backpack. "Grandma Hope," she said with that little voice that always melted my heart. "Mommy and Daddy are fighting really loud. Mommy says you're crazy and you want to destroy the family. Daddy says I'm not allowed to see you anymore. Is it true that you're crazy?" I knelt down to her level and hugged her tight, breathing in the strawberry shampoo scent of her hair. "No, my love. I'm not crazy. I'm just tired of being treated badly." "Does Grandpa Julian treat you badly?" The innocent question from that child broke my soul. "Yes, Elena, but sometimes adults don't know how to fix things." She was quiet for a moment, thinking with the seriousness children have when they sense the adult world makes no sense. "Grandma, at school they taught us that nobody has the right to treat us badly, not even family." From the mouth of an 8-year-old came the wisest words I had heard in years. That night, after Elena stayed over, I told Lauren she wasn't leaving until they stopped fighting in front of her. I sat on my bed and opened, for the first time in decades, the journal I had kept as a young woman. On the first page, in my 23-year-old handwriting, I had written, "Today I married Julian Price. I know we will be happy forever because he promised to love me just as I am. Just as I am." When had just as I am stopped being enough? When had I started apologizing for existing? When had I started to believe I deserved scraps of affection in exchange for a lifetime of service? Elena slept beside me, breathing softly and trustingly, still believing her grandmother had all the answers. And looking at her, I made the hardest and most necessary decision of my 63 years of life. I would not let that little girl grow up thinking that women should be grateful for mistreatment, that our worth was measured by how much suffering we could endure in silence. The next day, I was going to do something I had never done in 4 decades of marriage. I was going to say no. At 7 in the morning, when the alarm clock went off just as it had every day for the last 40 years, something was different. I didn't automatically get up to make Julian's coffee. I stayed in bed, staring at my bedroom ceiling, listening to him move around the bathroom with a routine so ingrained he could do it with his eyes closed. "Hope," he called from the shower, "could you put the kettle on and make sure my blue shirt is ready?" For the first time in 4 decades, I didn't answer. Elena was still asleep beside me, with the peace that only children who feel completely safe possess. Her long eyelashes cast tiny shadows on her rosy cheeks, and her steady breathing was the only thing giving me calm in the storm I was about to unleash. "Hope!" Julian's voice was louder now, slightly irritated by my lack of response. "Are you listening to me?" I got up slowly, put on the cotton robe I'd had for 15 years, because I had never deserved a new one, and walked to the kitchen. But instead of turning on the stove, I poured a cup of coffee just for myself. I sat at the breakfast table and waited. When Julian came downstairs, expecting to find his breakfast served as always, he stopped short upon seeing me sitting calmly, drinking my coffee and reading the New York Times. "What's going on? Where is my breakfast?" I looked at him over the top of the paper, took another sip of coffee, and said with a calmness that surprised even me, "Your breakfast is in the kitchen. In the fridge, in the pantry, in the cupboards. Same place it's always been." His face went from confusion to anger in a matter of seconds. "Hope, I don't have time for games. I have an important meeting at 9. Then you'd better hurry up and make your own breakfast." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Julian stared at me as if an alien had taken over his submissive wife's body. "What's wrong with you? Are you sick?" "No, Julian. For the first time in years, I'm completely healthy." He tried to flash that condescending smile he used when he wanted to calm what he called my hysterics. "Honey, I understand you're going through a difficult phase. Menopause can sometimes cause these mood swings, but you can't make irrational decisions that affect the whole family." "Family?" The word came out of my mouth with a bitterness that startled me. "Are you referring to the family that includes Stella?" Or the family where our daughters blame me for your cheating? His smile vanished completely. For a moment, I saw something like panic flash in his eyes, as if he was finally realizing that the obedient wife he had taken for granted for 4 decades had woken up. Hope, I think you need professional help. This behavior isn't normal. You're right, I replied, standing up and walking to the sink to rinse my cup. It's not normal for a woman to tolerate 40 years of humiliation. It's not normal for a wife to let her husband treat her like a maid in her own house. It's not normal for a mother to watch her daughters defend the man who betrays her. So what now? You're going to file for divorce? At 63? Do you know how ridiculous you'll look? That question stopped me short. For a moment, doubts circled me like vultures. Was it too late to change my life? What would the neighbors say? How would I survive alone? But then I remembered Elena's words. Nobody has the right to treat us badly, not even family. I don't know if I'm going to file for divorce, Julian. But I do know that starting today, things are going to change. How are they going to change? For starters, I will no longer be your personal maid. You can make your own breakfast, wash your own clothes, and clean up your own messes. And who, may I ask, is going to keep this house running? The question made me laugh so hard I nearly choked. Keep the house running? Julian, this house runs on my money. The inheritance my parents left me. The money you've been managing without so much as a thank you. That money is ours. No, I interrupted, feeling a strength I didn't know I had swelling in my chest. That money is mine, and after what I discovered, I'm taking back full control of it. For the first time in our relationship, I saw real fear in Julian's eyes. Not the fear of losing me. It was clear that didn't matter to him. But the fear of losing access to my money. Hope, you can't make major financial decisions without consulting me. You don't understand the legal complexities. Then you'd better start explaining those complexities to me. Because as of today, I'm going to be very involved in every single dollar that leaves my bank account. That morning, after Julian left for his office in a rage, without breakfast because apparently a successful lawyer didn't even know how to fry an egg, I sat in the living room with Elena, who had woken up during our argument. Grandma, are you really not going to make Grandpa's breakfast anymore? No, sweetie. Grown-ups have to take care of themselves. And is he going to be mad? Probably. Elena thought for a moment, swinging her little legs as she ate the cookies I had made for her. My mommy says that when daddies get mad, it's the mommy's fault. That sentence broke my heart. My 8-year-old granddaughter was already learning that women were responsible for men's emotions. Elena, you know what? Your mommy is wrong. Every person is responsible for their own feelings and their own actions. So if Grandpa gets mad, it's not your fault? Exactly. I watched her process this information with the seriousness children have when the adult world finally starts to make sense. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I left the house without telling Julian where I was going or when I'd be back. I went to a lawyer's office, not Julian's or one of his colleagues, but a young woman recommended by the private investigator my mother had hired years ago. The lawyer, Clara Vega, was about 35 with an intelligent gaze that immediately inspired my confidence. Her office was small but tidy, filled with law books and a photo of her graduation that reminded me of my daughters when they were young and had dreams. Mrs. Anderson, she said after reviewing all the documents I had brought, your case is more complicated than I thought, but not impossible. Your husband has been handling your finances in a questionable manner. Questionable how? He's made risky investments with your money without your explicit knowledge. He's transferred funds to accounts where you have no access. And according to these documents, he's been using your inheritance to finance personal expenses that do not benefit the marital estate. Is that legal? Technically, yes, because you signed a general power of attorney. But ethically, she took off her glasses and looked at me directly. Mrs. Anderson, did you know what you were getting into when you signed those papers? I thought I was being a good wife. I thought I was showing trust. And he took advantage of that trust. But there's good news. We can revoke that power of attorney. We can get you back full control of your assets. And if you were to file for divorce, your husband would only be entitled to half of the marital property acquired during the marriage, not your family inheritance. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. How long would it take? To revoke the power of attorney, a week. For a complex divorce like yours, anywhere from 6 months to a year. That night, when Julian came home, he found me making dinner. For a moment, his face relaxed, as if he thought my morning tantrum was over. "Smells good," he commented, loosening his tie. "What are you cooking?" "My dinner," I replied without looking up from the pan. "Your dinner?" "Yes, I'm cooking for myself. If you're hungry, the kitchen is available." We ate in silence that night, each with a plate we had prepared ourselves. Julian had managed to make a ham sandwich, which he ate standing up, watching me as if waiting for me to apologize for the day's scene. But I didn't apologize. For the first time in 40 years, I didn't apologize for existing, for having needs, for expecting respect. And when I went to bed that night, I did so in the guest room. "What are you doing?" Julian asked when he saw me making the bed in there. "Sleeping," I replied simply. "Why not in our bed?" I looked him straight in the eye, without blinking. "Because that bed doesn't feel like ours anymore, Julian. It feels like yours. And I'm tired of sleeping in a place where I'm not welcome." I locked the door for the first time since we moved into that house, and I slept better than I had in years. When I woke up the next day, the first thing I did wasn't rush to make my husband's breakfast. The first thing I did was look at myself in the guest bathroom mirror and say, "Good morning, Hope. How are you today?" And for the first time in decades, the answer was, "Better." The following days were like living in a house in a state of silent war. Julian had started bringing home takeout from work, completely avoiding the kitchen where I prepared my own meals. He spent his evenings locked in his study, having hushed phone conversations that always ended abruptly when I walked down the hall, but I had started to experience something strange. Peace. In the mornings, I woke up without the knot in my stomach that had been my companion for years. I ate breakfast peacefully in my kitchen, reading the entire newspaper instead of just the headlines before rushing to serve others. In the afternoons, I went for walks in Central Park, something I hadn't done in decades because Julian needs dinner ready at 8 o'clock sharp. It was during one of those walks that I received a call that would change everything. "Mrs. Hope Anderson?" The voice was formal, professional. "Yes, this is she. This is Lewis Miller from Chase Bank. I need to inform you of an irregular movement on one of the accounts where you are listed as a beneficiary." My heart sped up. "What kind of movement?" An attempt was made to transfer $850,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands. The transaction was automatically blocked because it requires your personal signature, but I didn't need to hear any more. Julian was trying to steal from me. It wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't just humiliation. It was outright theft. That night, when he came home, I was waiting for him in the living room. I had laid out all the documentation on the coffee table. The bank papers, the photos of his affairs that my mother had saved, the original will, and a copy of the revocation of power of attorney I had signed that morning with Clara Vega. "We need to talk," I said as he walked in. He glanced at the table, saw all the documents, and his face went from tired to panicked in seconds. "Hope, I can explain." $850,000, Julian. "You tried to wire $850,000 of my inheritance to an account in the Cayman Islands without telling me." He slowly sat down on the leather armchair we had bought together 10 years ago, when I still believed we had a shared future. "That transfer was an investment. Stella knows a high-yield fund that—" "Enough!" I shouted with a force I didn't know I possessed. "Enough of the lies. Enough of treating me like I'm an idiot." The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in our relationship, I was the one with the power, the one controlling the conversation. "Do you know what hurts the most, Julian?" I continued, my voice quieter but firm. "It's not the cheating. It's not the money. It's the contempt. For 40 years you have treated me like your housekeeper, as if I had no brain, as if I didn't deserve respect, as if my only value was serving your coffee and ironing your shirts. Hope, that's not true. Isn't it?" I picked up one of the photos from the table. "This one is from 1987. You with some woman on a beach in the Hamptons while I was at home with our daughters who had the chicken pox. This one is from 1994. You kissing your secretary in your office parking garage while I was working double shifts to pay the mortgage on this house." His eyes darted to the window, unable to look at me. "And do you know what the most pathetic part of all this is?" I went on, feeling 40 years of silent rage finally find its voice. That for all these years I've been the one apologizing. Apologizing for getting older, for not being interesting enough, for not being the woman you deserved. When in reality, you never deserved a single day of my life. Julian stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to me. When he turned around, I saw something in his face I had never seen before. Real desperation. What do you want, Hope? Money to keep you quiet? A public apology? For me to end things with Stella? Tell me what you want, and I'll do it. His question showed me exactly who this man really was. After 40 years, he still thought everything could be bought, everything could be negotiated, that I was a problem to be managed with the right strategy. I don't want anything from you, Julian. That's the exact difference between us. You always wanted everything from me. My money, my youth, my service, my silence. I just wanted you to truly love me. I did love you. No! The word came out like a roar. You loved the idea of me. You loved what I could give you. My inheritance, my availability, my tendency to fade into the background so you could shine. But you never loved me. I walked to the mantelpiece where our wedding photos were displayed. I took them down one by one and placed them on the table. See this one? I showed him the photo of us cutting the cake. Here, I thought I was starting the love story of my life, but you were already calculating how much my family was worth, weren't you? Hope. And this one? Another photo, our honeymoon in Paris. While I was getting emotional visiting the Louvre, you were thinking about the business contacts you could make with my parents' money. I took all the photos and, one by one, ripped them in half. The sound of tearing paper filled the silence like small explosions. What are you doing? Julian moved as if to stop me. Something I should have done years ago. Destroying the fantasy. When I finished with the last photo, I picked up the most important document of all. The complete revocation of power of attorney. As of tomorrow, you have no access to a single dollar of my money. You cannot use my credit cards. You cannot make investments in my name. You cannot even check the balance of my accounts. His face went as white as the wall. Hope, you can't do this. We have joint expenses, financial commitments. The commitments you have made will be your problem. I will pay for exactly half of this household's expenses, nothing more. Your expensive clothes, your dinners with Stella, your investments in the Cayman Islands, you'll be paying for all of that with your own salary. And what if I file for divorce? The question I had been dreading for weeks left his lips like a threat. But instead of the panic I expected to feel, a strange sense of relief washed over me. Perfect, I replied with a smile that surprised even me. You'd be doing me a huge favor. A favor? Julian, I've been living like a divorced woman for years. Sleeping alone, eating alone, making decisions alone. The only difference is, if we officially divorce, I'll finally be able to live in peace, without having to pretend I respect a man who doesn't respect me. I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the stress lines that had deepened on his face in the last few days. Do you know what the difference is between you and me, Julian? You're afraid of being alone because you know that without my money and my free domestic labor, your life is going to be much harder. I, on the other hand, am looking forward to being alone because I'm finally going to discover who I am when I'm not busy managing the feelings of a man who never once cared about mine. That night, he left the house. I don't know if he went to Stella's, to a hotel, or to his office, and frankly, I didn't care. For the first time in 4 decades, the house was completely mine. I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine he had been saving for special occasions that apparently never included celebrating anything with me, and I sat in my living room, on my armchair, breathing the air of my home. The silence didn't feel empty, as I had feared. It felt full of possibility. Early that morning, when the phone rang, I thought it would be him, calling to apologize or to try another round of manipulation, but it was Elena. Grandma, are you okay? Dad told me Grandpa Julian left. I'm okay, my love. Better than I've been in years. Are you going to be sad? My granddaughter's question made me think. Was I sad? I had lost a 40-year marriage. I had confronted my daughters. I had broken away from the only life I'd ever known. You know what, Elena? I don't think what I'm feeling is sadness. I think what I'm feeling is freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from pretending to be someone I'm not, to to make someone happy who never cared about my happiness. The next day, my new life would begin. At 63 years old, for the first time in decades, I had no idea what was waiting for me, and I couldn't have been more excited. The first morning without Julian in the house was like waking up in a completely new world. There was no one waiting for breakfast to be served at 7:30 sharp. There were no shirts to iron or coffee to make for two. For the first time in 4 decades, my time was completely my own. I got up when I felt like it, which turned out to be 9 o'clock, 2 hours later than usual, and made myself a breakfast I hadn't had in years. Toast with homemade strawberry jam that my neighbor Connie had made, which I'd never tried because Julian said it had too much sugar. Coffee with milk in my favorite mug, a blue ceramic one he had banished to the back of the cupboard because it didn't match the good china. Freshly squeezed orange juice while listening to music on the radio, something he considered unnecessary noise during meals. Every small pleasure felt like a revolutionary act. That morning, I did something I hadn't done since the early years of my marriage. I got dressed up for myself. I put on an emerald green dress I had bought 2 years ago and had only worn once because Julian commented that it drew too much attention for a woman my age. I put on makeup carefully, not to impress anyone, but because I liked how I looked in the mirror with a little color on my cheeks. I left the house with a strange feeling in my chest, a mix of nerves and excitement that took me a moment to recognize. It was the same feeling I had in my 20s when I first set out to explore New York City, when everything seemed possible and the whole world was waiting for me. My first stop was Carmen's hair salon, where I had gone for 20 years for the same conservative cut Julian approved of, elegant and age-appropriate. But today, I had other plans. Carmen, I want a complete change. The stylist, a woman in her 60s who had seen decades of fads and transformations come and go, looked at me with curiosity. Are you sure, Hope? You've had the same hairstyle since I've known you. That's exactly why. I want something different, something that makes me feel alive. 2 hours later, I walked out with a modern bob that barely touched my shoulders, with subtle highlights that lit up my face. Carmen had worked like an artist, snipping away years of conservatism with every cut. You look beautiful, she said as I looked at myself in the mirror. You know, I always thought you had the potential for something more daring, but I didn't dare. I finished the sentence for her. And now you do? Now I do. From the salon, I went straight to Bloomingdale's. Not to the classic women's section where I always shopped, but to the departments I had only ever admired from afar. I tried on brightly colored blouses, pants that defined my figure instead of hiding it, and shoes with a slight heel that made me feel elegant and powerful. The sales assistant, a young woman with discreet tattoos on her wrists, helped me with infinite patience. Is this for a special occasion? She asked as she showed me a mustard yellow blazer I never would have considered before. Yes, I answered, looking at my reflection in the fitting room. It's for the rest of my life. I spent more money on clothes that day than I had in the last 5 years combined, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. It was my money, my inheritance, my right to feel beautiful. That afternoon, walking down Fifth Avenue with my shopping bags and my new haircut blowing freely in the wind, I ran into Megan Reynolds, an old classmate I had lost touch with years ago. Hope? Oh my God, you look radiant. What have you done? The question made me laugh. I found myself. We went for coffee at a small French bistro I had seen 1,000 times but never entered because Julian said, those places are expensive and pretentious. Megan and I talked for hours, remembering youthful dreams I had buried under decades of domestic obligations. Do you remember you wanted to study art history? She asked as we shared a chocolate cake that tasted like heaven. Vaguely, I lied. The truth was, I remembered it perfectly, but I had pretended for so long that those dreams didn't exist that I had almost convinced myself. It's never too late, you know. My sister started her psychology degree at 55. Now she has her own practice. Those words echoed in my head for days. A week after Julian left, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Lauren, but her tone was completely different from our previous conversations. Mom, I need to talk to you. Are you okay, honey? Michael and I have been talking a lot these past few days. About what happened, about Dad, about how we treated you. There was a long pause, filled with shaky breaths that made me think she was crying. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You were right. He shouldn't have treated you that way, and we had no right to defend him. It wasn't the complete apology I had been hoping for, but it was a start. Thank you for calling, Lauren. Can we see you? Elena has been asking about you every day, and I want to get to know the woman who had the courage to do what you did. We arranged to meet the following Saturday in Central Park, near the conservatory water where I used to take the girls when they were little. It was neutral ground, filled with good memories that might help rebuild broken bridges. When Elena saw me, she ran toward me with her arms wide open. Grandma, you look beautiful. Did you get a haircut? I did, my love. Do you like it? I love it. You look like a cool grandma. Lauren approached more slowly, studying my face with those analytical eyes she had inherited from me. Mom, you look different. Different how? I don't know. More present. It's like you were a faded photograph before, and now you're in HD color. We walked through the park while Elena ran ahead, chasing pigeons and collecting autumn leaves. Lauren and I spoke with a honesty we hadn't shared in years. Did you know about the other women? I finally asked. She stopped and looked at the ground. I suspected, but it was easier to blame you than to face the fact that my father is a scoundrel. And now? Now I understand you had been asking for help for years in ways I refused to hear, and I'm ashamed for being so blind. That afternoon, the 3 generations of Anderson women, Elena, Lauren, and I, shared ice cream on a bench facing the pond where children sailed model boats. It was the first time in months I felt like I was part of a real family. Grandma, Elena said as she ate her strawberry ice cream, my teacher says girls can be anything they want when they grow up. What do you want to be when you grow up? The question made me laugh, but it also made me think. You know what, Elena? I think I want to be a student again. A student of what? Of art, of history, of everything I never had time to learn because I was too busy taking care of other people. That night, alone in my house that no longer felt empty but full of possibilities, I sat down with my laptop, another recent purchase Julian would have deemed unnecessary, and searched for continuing education programs at Columbia University, art history. There it was, waiting for me after 4 decades. The application deadline was in 2 weeks. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't consult with anyone before making a major decision. I filled out the application, uploaded my documents, and paid the fee with my own credit card. When I was done, I poured myself another glass of Julian's expensive wine and toasted myself. To Hope Anderson, 63-year-old college student. The wine tasted like freedom. That night, I dreamed of museums filled with paintings waiting for me to understand them, of professors who would value my questions, of classmates who would see me as an equal, not a servant. I dreamed of a life where my age wasn't a limitation, but an advantage, where my years of experience became wisdom to interpret art and history. I woke up with a smile that didn't fade all morning. A month into living alone, I realized something surprising. I didn't miss Julian. I missed the idea of companionship. I sometimes missed having someone to share a movie or a meal with, but I didn't miss him. What I had found was something much more valuable. I had found myself, the Hope who bought fresh flowers every Tuesday because she loved how they made the house smell. The Hope who stayed up late reading frivolous novels she never had time to enjoy before. The Hope who sang in the shower, danced while she cooked, and laughed out loud watching comedies on Netflix. The Hope who had been asleep for 40 years had finally woken up, and she was beautiful. 6 months after the night Julian left, I'm sitting on the patio of a small cafe in Greenwich Village, reviewing my notes on Renaissance art history before my exam tomorrow. It's a perfect April morning, with that soft spring sun that makes New York look like a city of gold. I'm wearing a floral dress I bought last week, one I never would have dared to wear when I had to ask permission for every dollar I spent. Beside me, on a table for 2 that I now occupy without guilt, are my books. My notebooks filled with handwriting that has grown more confident with each class, and a cup of coffee that no one made for me but myself. It's been 6 months, but it feels like 6 years of life reclaimed. The university has been a revelation. My classmates, some in their 20s, Others adults like me who decided it was never too late to learn. Treat me as what I am. Just another student, with valid opinions and intelligent questions. Professor Davis, a man my age who has dedicated his life to studying the Italian masters, values my contributions in class as much as anyone else's. Mrs. Anderson, he told me after my presentation on Botticelli last week, you have a unique perspective on maternity and Renaissance Madonnas. Your analysis of how life experience enriches artistic interpretation was brilliant. Brilliant. A word no one had ever used to describe anything I'd said. I've discovered I have a knack for languages, so I've also enrolled in an Italian class. Per vedere l'arte italiana nella sua lingua originale, I told my professor when she asked why I wanted to learn. To see Italian art in its original language. When I'm not studying, I've been rediscovering New York as if I were a tourist in my own city. I visit museums on a Tuesday afternoon just because I can, without having to ask anyone if it's a good use of my time. I walk through neighborhoods I used to avoid because Julian said they weren't safe for a woman alone. I sit in parks to read. I go to afternoon movies. I've started taking flamenco classes on Thursdays because I always wanted to dance, and now there's no one to tell me that women my age look ridiculous moving like that. The house has transformed as much as I have. I got rid of all the heavy, dark furniture Julian had chosen to project a serious image, and replaced it with things that make me happy. Comfortable sofas in light colors, plants that fill every corner with green and life, paintings I bought from small galleries because I loved them. Not because they matched the decor. The master bedroom, which I kept closed for months because it hurt too much to enter, I've turned into my study. That's where I have my desk for homework, my books organized by artistic period, and prints of my favorite artworks hanging on the walls. It is my sanctuary, my sacred space where no one can come in to criticize, to demand, to interrupt. Elena visits me every Saturday. We've started a tradition. She brings her homework, and I help her with math while I teach her about the artists I'm studying. Last week, I showed her prints of Frida Kahlo, and she was fascinated. Grandma, why did this lady paint herself so many times? Because she knew herself very well, my love. And when you know yourself well, you're not afraid to show the world exactly who you are. Do you know yourself well now? The question made me pause in my explanation of self-portraits. I'm learning, Elena. I'm learning. Lauren and I have rebuilt our relationship piece by piece. She comes for lunch on Sundays now, sometimes with Elena, sometimes alone. We talk about real things, my classes, her job, her fears as a mother, her own postponed dreams. I no longer pretend everything is perfect, and she no longer expects me to. Mom, she told me a few weeks ago as we drank tea in my newly renovated garden, I wanted to apologize again. Not just for not supporting you with Dad, but for not seeing you. For years, I only saw you as my mother, as the person who was there to solve our problems. I never saw you as Hope, as a woman with her own dreams and needs. And I let it happen, I replied. I became invisible even to myself. Jenna has been more difficult. She's still in the city, still resentful about what she calls the unnecessary drama that destroyed the family. We talk on the phone once a month, polite but distant conversations where she tells me about her restaurant and I tell her about my studies, but there's always an underlying tension. So when are you going to forgive Dad? She asked on our last call. It's not about forgiveness, Jenna. It's about self-respect. Your father can ask for my forgiveness if he wants, but that doesn't mean I have to go back to being treated the way I was for 40 years. But marriage is work, Mom. It takes sacrifice. Yes, honey, but sacrifices have to be mutual. I sacrificed 4 decades. What did he sacrifice? She had no answer for that. I know little about Julian and want to know even less. The divorce papers arrived 3 months ago, signed without any drama or financial demands from his side. Apparently, his lawyer explained that he had no claim to any of my family inheritance, and that fighting it would only cost him money he didn't have. Clara Vega confirmed that he had tried to request alimony, but when his lawyer saw the documentation of his affairs and the attempted fraudulent transfer to the Cayman Islands, he withdrew the claim immediately. Your ex-husband understood it was better to settle this quietly, Clara told me with a satisfied smile. Sometimes men who've been bullies for years get scared when they realize the woman is holding a better hand. The only time I saw him after that night was 2 months ago, by chance, at the shops at Columbus Circle. He was with Stella, looking at kitchen appliances. He looked older, more tired, as if the weight of maintaining a life built on lies was finally taking its toll. Our eyes met for a second. He raised a hand in a timid wave, perhaps hoping I would approach, start a conversation, give him a chance to explain or apologize. I gave him a polite nod and kept walking. I felt no anger, no pain. I felt something much more liberating. Indifference. That night I wrote in my journal. Yes, I've started keeping a journal again like I did in my youth. Today I saw Julian with his new life and realized he is no longer a part of mine. I don't hate him. I don't love him. He simply no longer exists in my emotional world. It's strange how indifference can be more healing than forgiveness. Now, sitting in this cafe, surrounded by young students cramming for their own exams, I allow myself to do something I haven't done in decades. Imagine my future. I'm going to finish my degree. Maybe I'll take graduate classes. I've been thinking about a trip to Italy next year to see the art I'm studying in person. Florence, Rome, Venice. Cities full of art and history that are waiting for me. Megan, my reconnected friend, has been insisting I join her group of friends for a trip to Paris in September. A group of newly liberated women taking on the world, she says, laughing, and I'm tempted. Very tempted. I've also been considering something that scares me a little but excites me a lot. Writing. I have so much history stored up, so many reflections on what it means to lose and find yourself, that maybe they could help other women who are where I once was. My phone buzzes with a text from Elena. Grandma, can I go to the museum with you this Saturday? I want to see the painting you told me about, Las Meninas. I smile as I type back, yes. Elena will be my museum partner. Just as I was a partner in sacrifice to a man who never appreciated it. But the difference is that Elena sees me, values me, and respects me for who I am. I pack up my notebooks and get ready to go home. My home, where no one is waiting with demands or criticism, where I can have dinner at 9 o'clock if I feel like it, where I can watch romantic movies without anyone commenting on how cheesy they are. As I walk to the subway, I think about the woman I was 6 months ago. That hope who lived apologizing for existing, who hid behind false smiles and infinite compliance. That woman who believed her value depended on how much she could give without getting anything in return. And then I think about the woman I have become, one who says no without justifying it, one who takes up space without apologizing, one who invests time and money in herself without feeling guilty, one who has plans, dreams, and goals that don't involve serving others. It's not that I've become selfish. It's that I've learned that taking care of myself isn't selfishness, it's survival. On the subway ride home, I see my reflection in the dark window. Short, modern hair, clothes I love, straight posture, bright eyes. I look like what I am, a 63-year-old woman who is finally living her own life. And I think, hope, my girl. Mom was right. Dignity is not negotiable, not even for love. That night, before I sleep, I ask myself, have you ever experienced anything like this? Do you know someone who has had to choose between self-love and the comfort of the familiar? If so, I want you to know that it is never too late to start over. It's never too late to say, I deserve better. It's never too late to reclaim your name, your dignity, your right to exist without apology. If my story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe so this message can reach someone else who needs to hear that freedom, even if it comes late, is always worth it. Because in the end, it's not about the years you lost. It's about the years you have left to live, and those years are all yours.